Hello friends, this is Odds with a p-value of 0.1, and today I have a bit of a pessimistic prediction to make about the state of Dead by Daylight in the near future. This is not something that I want to happen, but it's something that I'm afraid will happen. I'm going to walk you through my logic and my reasoning, and at the end of it all, you feel free to agree, disagree, give me your own opinions. This has to do with the meta shakeout and the state of tunneling. As we all know, some time ago the devs changed a bunch of the strongest perks in the game and the most popular ones to try to spice up the gameplay, but people don't like it. People complain about the gameplay now even more than before. They complain about tunneling being even more prevalent than before. And it doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would people tunnel more? Tunneling being hooking the same survivor repeatedly, aggressively to get them out of the way. Why would killers do that more now? In the past, if we go back a few months, in Dead by Daylight, the base kit BT was not a thing. If you got unhooked, you could immediately get hit and down again in like 1 second and get on the hook again. If we go even further into DBD's history, you could get immediately hit after an unhook and then immediately moried, because mories worked after one hook back in the day. And if we go even further and further and further, there was a time when killers could down you at the start of the game and just more you, and you would be dead within 30 seconds of the game starting. So I think it's pretty clear that tunneling now is a lot harder than before, at least if we go back into DBD's history. So why do people do it more? Because it's more necessary. The state of the meta right now is at a point where having 4 survivors alive in no matter what shape they are is horribly difficult for the killer and horribly scary. Even if you have 4 survivors that are all injured, all dead on hook, all at the end of the rope, 4 survivors in this situation can bounce back with 4 adrenalines, 4 hopes, endgame perks, medkits, boons, what have you, and it is very difficult for killers to manage this. On the flip side, if we have 3 survivors left because we've tunneled one of them off, it doesn't matter what state they're in. Even if they're all healthy, even if none of them have been hooked, with 3 survivors left, 1 good kick on a generator with Eruption Call O'Brien, a down shortly after, someone hit by Eruption, bam, suddenly 3 survivors are completely useless and it's a lot more manageable as a killer. Killers have a massive, massive incentive to tunnel a person out. So how do we fix this situation? Well, there's 2 ways to fix this situation, roughly speaking, and this is the problem. The issue that I'm going to talk in today's video mainly is how this will be solved and what will happen as a result. Let's try first to buff the survivors that come out of the hook so that they are stronger and harder to tunnel. We could do things such as making the endurance last longer or making it stronger so it's harder for the killer to hit the survivor repeatedly after an unhook. So we could do that. We could even make it so the endurance stuns the killer momentarily to dissuade them from focusing on the same survivor. You could even make that survivor get 3% faster or some other number so that they're harder to catch. And then if you hook a survivor twice, now they're 6% faster. So they're super, super hard to catch unless you go for someone else or unless they touch a gen and then that disables. So you could give them a permanent speed boost and that would make it super, super hard for many killers to quickly tunnel a person out. You could also make it so that if a killer hooks the same person twice in a row, which is a bit of tunneling, now the gens are faster for everyone else. Or if you want to go the extra mile, you could make it so that if one person dies, now all of the gens go much, much faster for the remaining survivors. And in my opinion, these ideas seem nice at first glance, but they are the most dangerous. They are tricky to balance. Because if you make survivors very, very strong after the unhook, then the survivors will actively want to be hooked and will actually want the killer to hook multiple of them so that multiple people can benefit from this. So much like sometimes you get people coming and body blocking with off the record, you would have survivors that would want you to tunnel them, that would want to run in front of you and use their little advantages to force you to tunnel so that the team benefits from this. And this would feel awful and would actually defeat the point. The killers in this situation would actually want to tunnel even more than before because they realize that it's much better to power through all of these things on one person than to hook 2 or 3 people and then all of them potentially can hit you with all of these side effects. So I don't think this would be the better way to do it. It would make the unhooking survivors want to be very aggressive overall. The more safe approach would be to actually encourage the killer by buffing them strategically every time they hook multiple survivors. Or they split the pressure on multiple survivors. So we could have a Thanatophobia-like effect that makes gens slower, or some other effect. The more people are injured, to buff the killer for splitting pressure on survivors, which right now they don't get much of that. They could also be given a Gift of Pain-like effect, which makes survivors that have been hooked do gens slower, which would be fair. That way, if you hook multiple people, instead of focusing on one, now multiple people are hit by a debuff. And we could also have versions of Grim Embrace, which blocks gens if you hook everyone, and No Way Out, which blocks and delays gates if you hook multiple people as well. So these effects would be there to make it so that if the killer hooks multiple people, they have something going for them. So now the killer would have a meaningful choice between focusing on one survivor, and then the other 3 are in pretty good shape, or spreading the hooks across the survivors, and now all of them are hit by various debuffs to make the playing field a bit more even. But this next bit, which I think is the better one, has 2 massive problems. Number one, if these few changes that I've suggested roughly came to the game tomorrow, they would make the top tier killers absolutely unbeatable. If you had a nurse with all of her strong perks, all of her strong add-ons, and then you give her these effects, she would never lose a game. Same with Blight, same with other strong killers that are already very, very strong. So these changes could only come to the game, or something close to these changes could only come to the game if you nerf many of the strongest killers, many of the strongest perks, many of the strongest add-ons. And this would piss some killer players off so much. They would throw such a tantrum. But there's something that's even worse. And that is the fact that all of these things would affect the team, right? You as a survivor, even though you're an individual, you sometimes have to suffer from the decisions that you as a team have made. And all of these perks and all of these effects that could help with tunneling would feel very, very bad on an individual level. So if the killer gets rewarded for hooking 3 different survivors, the 4th survivor is going to be doing a gen. Now the gen will become slower, let's say, and he will throw a tantrum. Simply, he will be like, well, I am very good. My teammates are really bad. I'm here not being caught doing gens. Why do my gens feel slower now? Why are my gens slower when I am so good at the game and my teammates are just bad and they're just getting caught? It's not my fault. And that is perhaps an even bigger problem. Nobody as a survivor wants to admit that they need to carry the responsibility of the entire team. They want their individual place to matter when they play good. When they play bad, obviously they want to get a bailout from perks or teammates or whatever. So this would also be a problem. If down the line, the devs announce that killers will have some kind of debuff, or survivors will have some kind of debuff for hooking multiple people, you will find that survivors are actually super against this idea, because they'll feel this on an individual level is unfair. And how do you get past that? How do you get past the feeling that it is unfair? How do you tell someone that, even if you make a lot of other changes that are all positive, how do you tell someone that their gen is going to be 5% slower, even though they've done nothing wrong, or they've only done one tiny little thing wrong? People won't accept it, and they will throw a tantrum. And the devs have to measure this into their account when they make changes. If they want to play it safe, and this is a big fear, they might put out a PTB or put out a suggestion, and then people will be like, oh no, we don't like this, we don't like this, we don't like this. And then the devs will be like, okay, you know what? We don't do it. Keep the game as it is. It makes us enough money. It puts, it keeps everything more or less in check. We don't really need to fix anything if we don't want to, because people keep playing our game. So, all right, sure, we don't change anything. So yeah, that idea makes me really sad. The fact that even though there are ways to change this, once those changes come, we might just complain about them and ultimately not make them welcome to the game. I've already seen this a lot. I've already seen a lot of changes that ultimately were good for the game, have massive resistance and massive backlash early on before, they could settle into the game. So I just hope that if you see these changes in the future, and I expect these changes could be happening in the next 6 months, maybe next year, who knows, I hope that you have an open mind and that you know exactly what to ask from the devs. Or else, we'll never get out of this hole and this loop of perks becoming more and more unbearable on both sides. Well, that was it. That was my thoughts. You let me know what you think.